Recently, a peer of mine in one of Coleman's trade associations, MHCA, asked me to speak on a TED-like talk in regards to how our personal experiences influence the way we lead our companies. I thought that was very challenging, and I said to him, fine, and took on this challenge of understanding how my personal beliefs has transformed to my understanding and my leadership at Coleman Professional Services. And I asked the question, can passion make us better leaders? In thinking back about my education and my training, I often think about how I was taught to be more cerebral, much more clear in my decision making, much more by the numbers, non-emotional. Matter of fact, in behavioral health, not to be that emotional about business decisions, and to be sure I'm looking at the numbers and the quantitative aspects of the reports in order to make the best possible decisions. Yet, what's critical, I feel, is the variety of different issues that come across my desk and my personal experience to share with you. There are three. One is through my experiences with my son. Second is an experience with one of my colleagues at the MHCA Trade Association. And third, it's with listening to one of my clients, a testimonial at one of our presentations. And I asked the question, can passion make us better leaders? So let me introduce my son, Daniel Joseph Burns. Daniel came to my family at 10 and a half years old, where he was in foster care for special needs. My wife and I couldn't have children, so we were excited about the aspect of having a child be a part of our family. And in this particular case, Daniel had two failed foster care environments already, and they were hoping that we could be successful in supporting Dan's challenges. Dan had a lot of behavioral health problems even at 10 and a half. And I specifically remember one experience with Dan where he was diagnosed as being mildly mentally retarded, and he was illiterate. I went to the school and asked the teacher where he was getting class, and I said, could you give me the books so I can take him to the tutor? I'd like to get him to learn how to read. And she said, well, we don't give Dan books because he is illiterate. And of course I said, well, how is he going to learn how to read if he's not given books and the aid he needs? Well, she couldn't answer my question, and I took him out of that school, put him in a different school, and got him the teaching support he needed. And sooner or later, Dan could read fine. He was not illiterate whatsoever, and he was not even mildly mentally retarded. And I always remember that time period of the emotional and aspect of being a parent and how I had to fight for what my son needed in order to be educated. Well, fast forward with my son, with his continued problems, Daniel finally had more problems with the law, and I got a fateful contact about he was being arrested for murder. Daniel has been now convicted and imprisoned in Ohio for more than 28 years. And I continue to remember the importance and the issues of being a parent and what it's like to not have only having a child with disability, but having the challenges of having a child in prison. in support of that child. Please meet one of my colleagues, Kelly Henry Phillips. Kelly is a CEO of Mental Health Partners in Colorado, and Kelly and I were at a Mental Health Corporation's conference in which we were learning and listening to behavioral health organizations, specifically managed care organizations, talk about how they're going to reimburse or not reimburse community mental health centers like Coleman Professional Services. And they were talking about areas of reimbursement, area of managed care, different types of contracting that will be in the future. And in Ohio, soon to come, they will be managing public Medicaid. So I was particularly interested in learning about how managed Medicare works. So in the process of doing that, they were beginning to get really complicated in their presentations. Almost I was getting a headache in the process of listening to them. And lo and behold, Kelly stands up and says to the panel guests, "You don't get it. You just don't get it." Well, she started commenting about how community mental health is not just a reimbursement of one particular service like psychiatry or case management. It is a fabric of different services all across the community in which people support the individual who has chronic mental illness or addiction services and can work together in collaboration with that individual and their families. A wonderful explanation of what community mental health is all about, and certainly how brave Kelly was in talking about that and standing up and interrupting the discussion about providing reimbursement of service of care. I was so much impressed with her courage and also her articulation of our industry issues. And finally, my experiences with one of the clients that Coleman serves. Brittany begins to tell her story about how she was sexually abused at a very young age for years and had severe trauma in her life, which led to chronic mental illness as well as addictive behavior. She was in and out of local jail for her abuse and her cocaine habit. She just finally decided to get services at Coleman out of her release, and she received a variety of different mental health and addiction services with Coleman. Well, Brittany begins and identifies the critical aspects of recovery and how important each stage was to her life and her participation in those. A tremendously difficult experience of recovery, one I'm not too sure I could even do. And one of my board members asked Brittany in the presentation, well, what are you doing next? What's the next move for you? What's your goal? And Brittany described that she would like to get reunited with her second child. She is living presently with her mother and one of her children, and that her real goal is getting the family back, getting employed, and moving on with her life. And I asked her, well, Brittany, what can you do about that? What can Coleman? How can Coleman help you? And she said, basically, well, I'm on a waiting list for housing because it needs to be subsidized, and I don't have enough money, and the state won't let her bring her other child in without another extra room in her apartment. And I thought, wow, of all the things, wonderful things Coleman does, we still have not been able to address the complexity of rent subsidy for people who are trying to recover so they have a stable living environment in which to continue their path. Very emotional experience of someone who's tried so hard in her recovery. So when I reflect back on our question of can passion make us better leaders, I comment in three major points. One, if I can remember to think and believe like parents can in supporting their children, like I believe in my son, if I can believe in and understand the passion that Kelly gave in her presentation and her argument with the managed care companies, her courage about our industry, and if I can always listen to the clients like Brittany, who talks about their recovery and key things they need to have happen with their recovery, then I feel I can be a much better leader. So I ask you, can passion make you a better leader? Can passion make you a better human being?